So, ladies and gentlemen, on the day 24 of the Malian counter-offensive, we are now getting to a new phase where the wide assortment of aerial and ground maneuvers by the joint collaboration of the Malian armed forces with their allied Russian African Corps, we're beginning to get some undeniable results, to the point where RFI really cannot deny the results, because the terrorists report straight back to them. And it cannot always come with the truth, because they don't have that identity of telling 100% truth. They will always try to add some chocolate to it. So today's mission started in the Tintemari region, then to the Bear region, then to Gao. These, to me, are the buffer states before you get to the Kidal region. Don't forget, the Malians have their assets too in the Hageok region, as they continue to pummel the enemies in Kidal. But this is the Kidal region, and ladies and gentlemen, the enemies have now taken another huge bombardment today. Let's watch this video.
Carried out to the northeast of the village of Tentemarin. Similarly, an aerial operation was successfully conducted on one of the trucks transporting enemy logistics in Oder, northeast of Bear. The targeted truck was completely destroyed. Following the impacts, several motorcyclists scattered in different directions. Still on May 15th, 2026, aerial assets of the Malian armed forces successfully carried out targeted strikes against terrorist armed groups in several localities. The first strike targeted 9 kilometers west of the locality of Jafarabe, an important hideout of the terrorist armed groups. As a result of the intervention, the hideout was completely destroyed. Reconnaissance operations are continuing in the area. A second strike carried out in the Dinguzma sector, 92 kilometers northeast of the city of Bear, made it possible to completely destroy a Land Rover Prado-type vehicle belonging to terrorist armed groups moving toward the locality of Tentemarin. A third strike, successfully carried out 60 kilometers southeast of the city of Gao, targeted a major terrorist armed group. The assessment reports several terrorists neutralized as well as numerous motorcycles destroyed. A terrorist base located 16 kilometers northeast of Jabali was also visited by Malian aerial assets on May 16, 2026. These strikes made it possible to destroy several combat vehicles and neutralize several terrorists. Additionally, in the locality of Dogofri, aerial assets carried out several strikes. They succeeded in neutralizing terrorists and destroying equipment. The Chief of the General Staff of the Armed Forces congratulates the women and...
So what do you make of that information? because what I discovered in this operation was the area bombardments, and after the area bombardments, the African core forces together with the Malian armed forces, they moved in after the area bombardments just to make sure they clean up the remnants of these terrorists. While this battle was going on, it seemed as though the civilians were hearing familiar bells, ringing between two sides. And after some time, the Malian civilians discovered that one side became utterly quiet, and probably they were hearing motorcycles that were becoming loud and they were fading away. They definitely know what has happened. So the Russian African Corps and the Malian armed forces moved in to clear the area. It's going to be a deep cleaning according to the information we had. And look at how the civilians are sharing.
Very much. You can't advance.
And this is why it is going to be difficult for the enemies to infiltrate this region. The reason is because if you look at the smile on the faces of the civilian, you definitely realize that these Islamic extremists are not accepted in this region. For Islamic extremism to plant itself in any location, first of all, the ideology has to be accepted. So this is a separation. With the military bombardment they are facing right now, there is even going to be even a wider separation. Mali is now creating that deterrence. Mali is sending that message loud and clear. If you don't give up, whichever way you like to, we will de-radicalize you in the honorable way. Ladies and gentlemen, if you watched this video for this long, please help us hit the like and subscribe button if you've not subscribed to the Android community yet. The reason why we say you should hit the like button is because this valid information that we bring to you every day, there are some people that are confused because they don't have the truth. So they don't know what is true and what is not true because of the AI slopes out there and because of a lot of unfortunate negative propaganda about the situation in Mali. So please help us hit the like button so that these truths can get to a lot of people out there. Thank you. And the sponsors of our videos to this day has been these 5 names on this jug right here: Mr. Nelson, By Design, Flavor Blade, Omaketa, and Simanera. And I want to thank everyone else in the Android community for supporting us up to this moment. We want to say thank you. So after this first operation, the Malian armed forces graduated to another strategic wide assortment of bombardment on the parallel logistic lifeline of the enemies, which is the illegal mining operation. Remember, we've said this on the Android community, and I told you that the Malians were closing in on all of this parallel network of the enemy. I want to tell you categorically that the enemies, they are not as viable as they used to be. We took our time to study the different strategic lifelines of these enemies, and I can promise you, Mali of today is different from Mali of the 1st of April. The Mali of today is more united. The Mali of today is more stronger. The Mali of today is even more fierce. Even the partners like Saudi Arabia, Al Arabiya, the Malians have strongly condemned their action by giving media support to these terrorist elements. That is not the only thing. Ladies and gentlemen, the terrorists were carrying out illegal mining operation in the Intilit gold mine. They've really evacuated the entire gold mine because, according to the information we have, the Malian armed forces have struck the terrorists in that location to the point where the damage is becoming unacceptable for the enemy. So they had to run away from the place. And after running, they reported to some of their sources, and you can see that some of their sources are saying that Mali continues to get victory, but with some, the allegation they made. The reason why they are making that allegation is because this illegal gold mining, like we've said on the Android community, don't forget, the illegal gold mining is being channeled to these supporting countries. All for what? The supporting country give political backing and they give weapons to them. Even before the regime of Assimi Goïta, this has been going on. This parallel network has always been there. It's a way of even getting a larger amount of resources out of Mali without taxation, without negotiation. So terrorism is a tool that the same people that claim to love a nation has been using in the 21st century to further engulf a lot of mineral resources from this region. Like I said, the Malian armed forces continue to de-radicalize. And after this airstrike, and with these evidences we are seeing, the news is getting tighter on the enemy. The Malians did not stop at that, ladies and gentlemen. The Malians armed forces and the Russian African Corps aerospace units, they moved into a terrorist hideout after a reconnaissance operation where they spotted these enemies. A lot of TNTs were dropped. The enemies, some of them stood their ground and fired back. Some of them, they were de-radicalized immediately. The Malian infantry moved in. And ladies and gentlemen, the result was undeniably emphatic. This was an infantry maneuver that I have not been seeing in Mali, the number of Malian forces. Now, when you look at this video, this was after the major enemy combatants have been suppressed fiercely. Immediately when the Malians came, there was an encirclement in formations. So it really took the enemy out of surprise with fire and bells ringing from left to right. The enemy could not concentrate on a particular group that was assaulting their position. And the area reconnaissance continued to give the Malian ground forces the precise location and movement of the enemies. After the Malians dislodged and de-radicalized and they reintegrated a lot of this enemy to where they have to be, they moved in again. And you could see that on the ground right there, combing the territory, the Malians continue to hunt down some of the enemies that are trying to, look back, because some of their logistics that they've left behind in this position is very, very important to them. So the Malians were able to discover a lot of fuel depot. A lot was discovered, and the Malians completely destroyed the base.
Comment on va de l'autre côté? Voilà. C'est ce qu'on avait vu ici.
Now in the Kulikoro region, The Malian armed forces, together with the Russian African Corps, while carrying out a heli reconnaissance operation, they discovered a terrorist base in the Kolikoro region, a very big base. And what did the Malians do? They launched a precision targeted strike that completely devastated the camp. Now, about 2 or 3 escaped with shrapnel wounds. When you look at those videos, you can see 1 or 2 people still struggling, and but don't worry, in a few 100 meters, what happens, because you might take a medication that suppress pain, but the systemic circulation of the body is supposed to be closed. And once there is a opening in the systemic loop that carries oxygenated blood in the body, there is a total discombobulation of the body physiologic performance, and the enemy will collapse. So what we have in Mali right now is a total annihilation of the terrorists. For RFI, a propaganda mainstream media, to acknowledge the success of the Malian armed forces, you know that the truth is undeniable. It's very, very bitter. And that is why they try everything they can to subvert the truth. But ladies and gentlemen, we're at the point right now where the Malian armed forces is already unstoppable. So ladies and gentlemen, in the Sangopa region and the Sirauma region, the Malian armed forces equally launched a ground maneuver together with the drone unit of the Russian African Corps, and they were able to crush the enemy outrightly. A lot of evidences that are very, very gruesome. We can't provide it here. This is a time where I think the Malian doctrine has just changed forever. There was a time where the Malians would probably say that they would prefer to reconcile, they want to do the DDR, which is a de-radicalization, disarming and reintegration. But ladies and gentlemen, what we are seeing right now is a reintegration of the enemies to the gate of hell, where they are going to be properly judged. It is not a job of Assimi Goïta and the great Malian people to judge the enemy. For the Christians, the Bible says, "Thou shalt not judge." What the Malians are doing is making sure that they create the right environment for the judgment to take place, as long as they don't repent. Because in life gives you the exam before the correction. Life does not even give you examples. It gives you the exam, then you get the correction from the failures of the exam. If you don't acknowledge the correction, there will be multiple failure. That is why you see that a lot more Islamic extremists continue to get pierced by the brutal, vengeful capabilities of the Malian armed forces. So ladies and gentlemen, if you've gone this far, I want to appreciate you for joining. It's your boy 7200 signing out in Offset. But before I go, I want to thank everyone on the Andre community for your support so far, and I want to say thank you to the sponsors of this video. I appreciate you, and I want to say much love and respect. Bye bye.
Leading up to the very serious and recent crisis that you just mentioned, which actually began a little over 2 weeks ago from today. And once again, there is a threat to the capital exactly in the same context that led Holland to send the French army to prevent them from reaching Bamako. So you might say, well, that's a good thing then. Yes, except that the justification for the presence of the French armies was to fight against jihadism. But in reality, when they were in Kidal, which has been talked about so much recently, the city where supposedly the Russians said, listen, let us evacuate. We're not involved in your conflicts. In short, they supposedly abandoned those who were meant to be their allies and whom they were supposed to protect, the Malians. It had been true for so long that it's completely crazy. We've seen what has happened since then. And then you could sense a kind of euphoria in the French media. I'm thinking of France 24, of state-run media that operate with public tax money. I'm not even talking about the private channels. Let's not mention LCI and other channels like BFM TV. Who felt that when the rebels were at the port of Bamako, What a pleasure it was to take revenge on those bastards who drove us out of our own home. Our home, Francophone Africa, after all, come on. And they never say the government of Mali, not even the regime. The regime, that already says a bit more about what it is. No, they say the junta, the junta. Now that's delicious. I'm already picking up on that word in relation to what was just said, because since Mali's independence in the 1960s, in the early 60s, with the great Modibo Keïta, who was a major Marxist, and who proposed abolishing colonial borders and suggested to Senegal that they form a single country, it would have been magnificent. All those measures were undone by the envelopes from Houphouët-Boigny from Côte d'Ivoire with the agreement of the French. In short, the dream of a federal Africa. Modibo Keïta was ousted from power by a military coup. All right? It was generals who took power, the junta. Then it's colonels who oust the generals and lieutenants who oust the colonels. And when it gets to the point where sergeants are running a country, you shouldn't be too surprised. The French have always played that game, and now they talk about the junta as if all of a sudden they've become anti-militarists because it's well known that we are the Democrats who strive to limit the abuses of authoritarian and totalitarian regimes around the world. This is particularly true when these juntas are supported by oppressive regimes, namely Russia and China, both totalitarian and authoritarian systems. I insist on these words because if we use them, we fall into the trap. It's not the junta. It's the most popular government I know. I've known these regions for a very long time after all. That's not a reference. Living there a long time doesn't mean I know more. It's not enough. I know plenty of people who used to say, I've dealt with black people for 50 years. Me, I know. The guy didn't understand a thing. I know some who really did stay 50 years in the same African country. They don't know a single word of the language. Strange. Me, if I bump into someone at the Bamako market, I want to be able to apologize and for the woman or man to understand, in Bambara in this case, that I'm apologizing. To begin our discussion, let's first take a look at, now I'm getting to the main point. These are countries of such poverty. Visit the villages north of Bamako. Let's not even talk about it. Once you're past Ségou, heading north, then after that Gao, Timbuktu, and so on. There are markets where you find nothing but onions, onions, and more onions. Sometimes you can't even buy a single chicken, especially during the dry season. And suddenly, bringing it to current events, we see columns of guys with armored vehicles, drones, when they attacked the minister who was assassinated while he was in the mosque praying, when he was killed. That really left an impression on people, because they're not fundamentalists, but they are devout Muslims, with their 5 daily prayers. So, where does the money come from? How can you throw away a 4x4 when you can't even afford to throw away a chicken? Here, I'm getting to the heart of the problem. It's not possible that the money isn't coming from outside. So this Macron who looked so pitiful, there are still these special ties we have with this Africa that I love, and now all of a sudden they're showing ingratitude for the help we've given them at such a cost. And it's true that quite a few of our soldiers lost their lives over there. As a matter of fact, we've known a few of them for quite some time, by the way. I honestly can't help but suspect that they're the very ones financing the political opposition and funding the armed rebellion. So I'm not entirely idealistic either. That is to say, in my mind, I'm not giving a blank check in favor of these new regimes that in the streets of Macau are waving Russian flags and holding signs that say, Macron, get out. It feels to me like we're witnessing a second wave of independence. I experienced the first one. I was a preteen, about 14 or 15 years old. Why not? But I am wary because you never know. Here, it's not the Americans driving out the French. It's well known that the Americans dealt with the FLN while also siding with the Pièces Noires. We were just talking earlier about how the Americans can keep 2 irons in the fire financially. So I was on my guard. What dispelled my doubts? That it was truly a national popular movement. It was when you probably followed the back and forth of our ambassador in Niger, who stayed, who refused to leave Bamako, even though he was declared persona non grata. In diplomatic terms, you don't insist. You send a new ambassador who presents his credentials, which are either accepted or not by the state in which he represents France. It's incredible, the whole charade of staying there. Unfortunately, the regime, as they call it, the Nigerian government, gave instructions not to lay a finger on the French, because that's all they're waiting for to justify an intervention. This whole maneuver, the ambassador who stays at his post in the embassy, okay, he eventually left. This level of support is absolutely beyond ridiculous. Why am I taking this lengthy and unnecessary detour just to discuss the situation regarding our ambassador in Niger? It is precisely because I want to get back to the very core and heart of the complex Malian problem. I do indeed have it right here with me. Raise the question, where does the money come from? Why do these rebels, these jihadists, or even the identity-based rebels like the Tuaregs, where do they find the money to acquire such military equipment which represents several years' salary for a single armored vehicle, a 4x4 with a machine gun, for example? And now on top of that, they even had drones, which they didn't have a few years ago. Where does the money come from? I said the French. But maybe it's also the Americans who want to drive us out. My doubt has been dispelled. Now I'll finish on this point. When the largest surveillance base in the entire Sahel region, gigantic, in other words from Chad, if you know its geography, practically all the way to Mauritania, to the Atlantic, an American base that was in the north of Niger, right in the middle of the desert, which was set up without the authorization of the Nigerian government at the time. That was before what is called the junta. And it was Washington's eye over the entire region. The monitors knew down to the square centimeter what was happening in the desert. So there is always this old dream of preventing what is called nuclear technology, critical mass. The quantities of uranium reach a geometry such that the detonation begins. The security protocol is to have separations that are melted at the last moment to detonate the bomb. That's it. Why am I using this metaphor? Because critical mass is dangerous. For the imperialists, it would be if Black Africa and North Africa were to unite. You do whatever you want in the desert. Cocaine from South America arrives via Sierra Leone, one of the so-called informal countries, to put it politely. And then, once you reach the borders of Mali, the route heads toward Morocco and Algeria. After that, it gets distributed in Europe. There are customs officers. There's one every 20 kilometers in the middle of nowhere. To the customs officer, you offer about 15 years of his salary to, you can get anything through, motorbikes, heroin, cocaine. That's what you have to understand, the reality on the ground. So it's not a spontaneous surge of people. And it's true that there are real problems. It's true that for a long time, Mali's central governments neglected the peripheral regions. But those were regimes installed by the French. The ones who ousted Modibo Keïta, I'm coming back to what I was saying earlier, and who put in a succession of, the one who lasted the longest was the dictator Moussa Traoré. Many names of Malian footballers, Keïta, Traoré, etc. And the 12 tribes of Manding. There you go. I am now bringing back exactly what Macron means in this specific context. Over time, it's now been more than half a century. I'm taking the example of Niger on purpose. You'll see the connection with Mali. If you replace what I mean, uranium with gold, then we're back to Mali. But where? Niger, because there it's obvious. It's known as one of the largest uranium deposits in the world. That's well known now. It's located in Arlit, way up north, right in the middle of the desert. This uranium has been mined for ages by French companies. The junta, to use their term, has just taken this away from the French, which is something they can't forgive. But anyway, the French exploit the uranium with which we produce 60% of our electricity in France, which is a unique proportion in the world. Meanwhile, in Niger, 87% of citizens don't have electricity at home. It's the candle regime. Go figure. And he tells us you should have developed. But for heaven's sake, when you had all the power, you didn't do it. Because it was, could you tell me the specific name of the company that is responsible for managing